G'day guys and welcome to Aussie English. My objective here is to teach you guys the English spoken down under. So whether you want to speak like a fair income Aussie or you just want to understand what the flippin' hell we're on about when we're having a yarn, you've come to the right place. So sit back, grab a cuppa and enjoy Aussie English. G'day guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I have yet another interview for you guys. Today's a special interview because it's with my father. It's with my dad. So we sat down on Australia Day the other day and we had a bit of a chat about what it was like for him growing up, how he learnt about Australia Day in school, how it compares to places like America and the different holidays they have. We kind of talk about patriotism and nationalism in Australia compared to America as well, and how you should celebrate Australia Day if you are from overseas but you want to take part in that holiday. So it's a good episode today, guys. Remember, if you want to study today's episode, you can do so in the Aussie English classroom and you'll get a 5, maybe a 7-minute excerpt from today's interview with vocab, a listening comprehension exercise, and we sort of discuss some of the sentences and language that is used in each interview. There's a whole bunch of other interviews up there at the moment too from the past weeks that you can also study. So this is a really good way to practice your Aussie English comprehension. Anyway, guys, remember to give that a go. And remember, if you want to sign up for the Aussie English classroom, if you're thinking about it, you have until Sunday night this week, so the 4th of February, to sign up at the current rate before the price is increased on Monday. So if you want to save $17 per month when you sign up for the Aussie English classroom, sign up before Sunday. Anyway, you can give it a go for $1 for your first month. Get in there and start upgrading your Aussie English. Anyway, let's get into today's interview, guys. Take it away, Dad. All right, Dad, welcome to the Aussie English Podcast.
Hey, good to be back.
You've been on quite a few times. I don't think I've put any of the episodes up, so we'll have to see what the order is in the future with this one.
So, hi everyone. Happy to be here if it's the first time. Happy to be back.
I think this one will be probably out earlier because we're going to be talking about Australia Day. So
yeah, well,
I've got 3 days.
You've got 3 days to get it up. Yeah.
So, well, I guess we should just start with your experience of Australia Day growing up, how you celebrated it, and maybe a bit about the history of it.
Look, Australia Day for me was just, when I was a kid, was just another public holiday. You don't seem to see the significance of it as an Australian national celebration when you're a child. It's just another public holiday. But it always falls in the school holidays anyway. So it was really just a day that both Mum and Dad were available, and it was often we'd go away for the day, or we'd go to the beach, or we'd do something like that. So mostly it was a family thing when I was a child. As I was growing up, once I got to be a teenager or a young adult, a lot of it was around another time just to hang out with your mates. The classic Australian, have the Australia Day barbecue or go to the beach, or used to be back in those days, there was always a cricket match on. The way the scheduling of cricket is done now, it's a bit different, but so there's always something to go and do with your friends.
So what were your fondest memories of that sort of holiday? Was it always related to the beach?
Yeah, mostly the beach, because obviously it's falling in the middle of our summer, and it's a public holiday, so both parents were available, so it was a sort of family thing to go to the beach.
And how would you compare it, I guess, to things like July the 4th and our perception of that in Australia? Is Australia overly nationalistic or patriotic?
Yeah, look, there is a patriotic element to it. I think we're not as patriotic as the Americans are with regard to some of the symbols like Independence Day, the flag and those sort of things, but there's a strong element of that.
That's the weirdest thing I think I noticed from Australia Day is probably the only time you will see the Australian flag.
Yeah.
Unless it's maybe Anzac Day and
yeah,
stuff like
there are flags on buildings and those sort of things, and public buildings always have the Australian flag or the state flag or both, sometimes the Aboriginal flag or the Aboriginal Torres Strait Island flag, even though the Torres Strait Islanders have their own. Yeah. They identify with the standard sort of black, red and yellow one. So there's that element, but you're right. I think, if you go driving around today, 2 or 3 days before Australia Day, there'll be people who'll have the Australian flag hanging from the aerial on their car, and they'll have it, maybe in the front of their house and things, but that doesn't happen as often as.
And the funny thing is, they'd take it down pretty much straight away after.
Yeah, right? It'd go down. So it's there for the the celebration of the day, rather than it being a sort of nationalistic, patriotic thing full time.
What do you think's with that? Digging in, I guess, going away from Australia Day slightly, why do you think Americans are so much more patriotic than Australians when, I would imagine both countries have their reasons to be proud of who they are?
Yeah. And look, it's difficult to judge the distinction between patriotism and the symbolism of patriotism. I think most people around the world are patriotic towards their country, but sometimes those symbols are the things that we concentrate on, like the flag, the national anthem, national holidays, those sort of things. I think Americans, and apologies to my American friends and relatives
who are learning
Australian English, who would probably cringe at what I'm about to say. But certainly, as a foreigner, a non-American, my impression of American patriotism is it is about the fact that the Americans, 250 years ago, fought for their national identity. They fought to become a country, which Australia did not. No, Australia did not. Australia was a penal settlement originally, and we then federated to become a country by joining the colonies together into states in one country.
Which was only
in 1901. So it's only 117 years ago that happened. But we never fought to become a country. We didn't fight to get rid of the British to become a country. We just did. And so I think there's that patriotism in most countries, as I said, about people like the country they live in and they respect the culture and the history and all those sort of things. But in the case of America, I think it is a bit of a sort of national celebration of the fact that they deliberately created a country by fighting for it.
Yeah, it was always weird for me because I guess growing up I never really understood the whole being that proud, of being from a certain country. Australia, I don't know, how do you feel about the average Australian and their sort of opinion of being Australian? Because we just don't seem to wear it like the Americans seem to, or a lot of other countries seem to.
Yeah, you're right. I think it comes down, it sort of almost, it doesn't sort of eventuate, or it doesn't show until it counts.
Yeah.
And by it counts, it may not be something dramatic like a war or something, but Australians are extremely patriotic when it comes to sport. If we're playing a sport against another country, or we go to the Olympics or the World Championships or the Commonwealth Games or any of those sort of things, Australians become very patriotic about wanting other Australians to be successful on their behalf. And so I think there's that, whereas we just tend not to overtly celebrate Australia as a country without any particular reason.
Yeah, it is a bit of a peculiar one with regards to that. Why do you think it's so associated with the beach? Obviously just because it's...
Well, yeah, if you come from central Australia, or you come from an inland town that isn't near the beach, then you're not going to associate that with the beach. If you grew up in a small country town in outback New South Wales, you're probably going to associate your leisure activities with rural activities that are not related to the beach. It
or
could
the
be
beach
going
in a
out
lake.
on a farm, or it could be going to a lake, or if there's no water around at all, who knows what it would be. But most of the Australian population live very close to the coast. All of our large cities are on the coast. The two largest cities, which comprise more than a third of the population of the whole country, are focused right on the beach. Melbourne on the bay and Sydney on its surf beaches. And so our leisure activities, particularly over summer, which is obviously our long school holidays when you're growing up, are often you go to the beach.
Yeah.
The beach is free. It's fun. People surf, they swim, they lie around in the sand, they play volleyball or cricket or just hang out with their friends. So it's a sort of fun place to be when you're a child, and as you keep growing up, it keeps being one of those things that attracts you.
Yeah. And so did you have a deep understanding of what Australia Day was based on and meant when you were growing up as a kid?
Look, as a child, no. As a young child, it was taught is probably exaggerating the amount of effort that was put into it.
Yeah.
I think it was sort of mentioned, and we studied a lot of Australian history, either informally or formally, at primary school, and then if you were doing Australian history, or in fact just history, you did Australian history as part of that at high school. But Australia Day, as such, was not really celebrated from an historic point of view.
Yeah.
There wasn't an understanding of where it came from and those sort of things. And in fact, it's a funny one, because the current date that we celebrate Australia Day on is celebrating, for want of a better term, or at least it's recognising the date that Arthur Phillip and the First Fleet arrived in Australia and settled. And it wasn't Australia at the time, it was called New South Wales. Which is now a state. So it became the colony, and that colony ended up becoming the state of the country. So Australia didn't exist. It wasn't like we created Australia on that date. It was just the date that Europeans, white English people, celebrated that day. So our challenge has always been that has become the national holiday. But Australia Day as a holiday was not always on that date. 100 years ago, it was celebrated in July. It has also been celebrated on other days, apparently, as well. And so the concept of a national holiday to celebrate us as a nation, I think, is one that is highly laudable, and it's a useful thing to do. We all like to celebrate. We all like a holiday. And celebrating our history and culture as a nation is a good thing to do. Whether that date is the right date is the current argument politically that's going on around Australia at the moment.
So can you summarise that, I guess, from both sides at all? Why is it controversial having Australia Day on the 26th of January?
As I said, we celebrate it as the date of the creation of the colony in New South Wales, in what is now the city of Sydney. Indigenous people, many Indigenous people, call it Invasion Day because that's the day that Europeans came and landed in the country and stayed. There had been Europeans coming here previously, but they were exploring, or they just landed by accident. They hadn't come to create a home. And Europeans did, in the part of the English, did on the 26th of January in 1788. And so we are celebrating that date, and it is a reasonable celebration for a proportion of the population. But the people who are the Indigenous people, and those who identify either as or with Indigenous people, feel that it is not an appropriate day to have a holistic view of the celebration of Australia, because to them it was the day that their culture got invaded. And all of the horrendous things that happened to their culture afterwards are not worthy of celebrating on that day. So that's one side of that argument. The other side of the argument is that it's Australia Day and therefore it should be celebrated. The challenge we have at the moment is that, and the thing that irritates me particularly among some of the conservative commentators and politicians, is that they are criticising people who are claiming that Australia Day should not be on that day, but conflating that with an argument saying it's un-Australian. How can you, argue about Australia Day? And as far as I've read and seen, nobody is saying we shouldn't have Australia Day. They're simply saying it shouldn't be on that date. And so the conflating argument is always around, it's un-Australian to criticise Australia Day. The people who are criticising it are not criticising Australia Day as a concept, they're criticising having it on that date. And I think we have to look at that argument from both sides, and people will be sensitive no matter which side they look at.
Because it gets difficult, doesn't it, when you've grown up and it's tradition, and it would be like shifting Christmas for some people.
And
that's where, I can at least understand, I guess, that side of the argument, where it's not even about what that day may have represented 170, 200 years ago, but it's more about what it represents for them and their lives and their personal history with that day.
I agree.
And it's hard to suddenly, be, you can't just sort of change Christmas and then be like, yay, it's the 4th of October, I can't wait for this. It would just not have the same gravity, I feel.
No, you're right. You're right. But the real challenge with it is that there hasn't been a long-standing set of that date.
Yeah.
It's longer than most people who are alive. So, you've always celebrated Australia Day as the 26th of January. In my memory, I think I always have as well, but it's not like that was constituted in stone when Australia was created. In 1901, when we federated Australia, we didn't decide on a national holiday then. Yeah. We had a national holiday and we used it, but it's become the 26th of January after that.
Well, that meant nothing to the other colonies,
and in fact, Australia Day now is a constituted holiday. It's written into our laws. It would have to be changed if we're no longer going to call it Australia Day and move to another day. But that was very recent. That's only in the last 30 years or so, I think. You can look up the date. I'm not sure, but I remember it happening. And so there is this challenge of, do we move a day because a few people, and it's a few, there's still hundreds of thousands, if not millions, who object to it, as opposed to those who object to it moving. I suspect that the large majority of people who sit in the middle are not passionate about either side of the argument, don't really care. And that's one of the challenges you have when you have the two extremes on both sides of an argument arguing about it, but most people don't care. Then it's really hard to move and make something happen if most people don't care.
That's it.
Because they end up just getting sick of both sides of the argument because they see them both as extreme.
So what advice would you have for listeners or viewers at the moment if they're about to celebrate their first Australia Day? How should they do it?
I think the best thing about Australia Day is find what you think of when you think of Australian culture. If you want to be the Aussie Ocker bloke and Sheila, to use some slang, which is probably getting a little bit out of date by now, but then there are traditional things around the beach and sport and barbecues and hanging out with your friends and doing those sorts of things. But we do that at Christmas. Americans do it at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and there's all sorts of national holidays around the world and other holidays where people do those sort of things. So I think for Australia Day, it is really about doing what you think of when you think of Australia. I don't know, certainly here, we probably won't go to a sporting event, but we might go to the beach.
That's it. That's about it.
And we'll probably either have friends around here for lunch or dinner time, or we'll go to their place or something. But
have a barbie.
Have a barbie, exactly. Depending on the weather. But Australian summers, or certainly southern Australian summers, being fickle, it looks like it will be quite warm and whatever on Friday, but it may well be 18 degrees and pouring with rain, which is not exactly barbecue weather, but that's not going to stop us getting together and having fun.
Oh, awesome. All right. Well, Dad, thank you so much for joining me on the Aussie English Podcast.
Thanks, Pete. Anytime.
No worries. Happy Australia Day, guys.
Happy Australia Day. Enjoy it, whatever you're doing.
See you guys.
Bye.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoy that interview. Special thanks to my father for coming on the podcast. I've done quite a few episodes with him recently, although I haven't yet uploaded any of them. So there's quite a few things that I've chatted to him about, and I am sure that you guys are going to hear from him in the future. He's one of those guys who seems to have an opinion on everything, but also know a great deal about pretty much everything. So stay tuned and you'll probably hear from Dad in the future. Anyway, guys, don't forget to check out the Aussie English Classroom if you want to finish today's episode as a mini course and learn Australian English a little more in depth. And remember that you have until Sunday the 4th of February to sign up and save $17 a month. That's it for me today, and I hope you have an amazing week. See ya!